I sat in front of therapists that I gave them more trauma by talking to them than they've had in their life. I did not find out about my first trauma until I was 20 years old. It was when I was 5. It was a neighbor. It was actually somebody that was law enforcement, church related. The father and son physically violated me sexually while the sister was hiding in the closet. That was the very first one. When you have a trauma like that, when you do not know, when your mind blocks it, I was going through the motions of life, put myself in situations. I dated older men. I was angry that my father was abusive. I was angry that my father almost killed my brother in front of me. I didn't have an outlet. I just used sex as my outlet. And one day I woke up, 2 people are at the edge of my bed. I'd never seen them before, and they're like, get up, get dressed. Their whole purpose is to break you down to the point where you submit to what they want. It's the whole model. He threatened to kill my family in front of me. On average, for a year, on the low end, 3 clients a day. On the high end, 10. And I was exhausted when it comes to trauma. And then we recreate over and over and over again, and we don't even know. We don't even know we do it. We're walking around in this haze from that, all those surgeries. And then I started to literally, I was sneaking around going to therapy. I want to rip out of my own skin, and I don't know what to do about it. I had nowhere to turn, and I was terrified still to go to the authorities. I was in the sex trafficking, and I just wanted to be remotely just a morsel of normal.
An exploration of trauma, transformation, and triumph. Your healing starts here. And we are back with another episode of Through the Trauma Podcast. I am Amber, your host. Today, I have with me Miss Michelle Fox. Michelle and I were talking just a few minutes before we jumped on here, and she has endured some of the most traumatic trauma, but also just it's stacked against her from her entire life. And she has found an interesting way of healing that, in her own words, that nothing worked, so she had to find her own path to healing. I'm excited to get into this conversation, Michelle, and thank you so much for being here with us. I'm excited to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. I gave a very quick introduction, but where did I leave holes there?
Well, it's how you said it of stacked against is so spot on. And I had never really put 2 and 2 together until I was laying down, just laying on a bed, and my best friend for many, many years, my entire life, was laying next to me, and we were just kind of just staring at the ceiling fan. And there was something traumatic happening during that time. And she turned, she's like, I don't know how you do it. I'm like, I don't get what you mean. She's like, you have had so much happen to you, and it still has never broke you. And that happened about I want to say 8 years ago. She said that to me. And it didn't quite dawn on me like, oh, wow, I've had a lot happen in my life, until I had a breaking moment about, call it 6 to 8 months ago. And there was just this moment where another thing happened, and I just fell to my knees, and I was like, I don't not understand. Like, I really do not understand. Is it enough? Like, can I just have a break, just a small morsel of a break? And with that, it was this strange feeling of, if I did not endure how much I did in my life, you cannot reflect what you do not know. There's absolutely no way I could have helped or help anyone if I didn't live and experience it. Because like you mentioned of trying all these things, as I sat in front of therapists that I gave them more trauma by talking to them than they've had in their life. And that's where it finally hit of, I get it. I understand, no matter how difficult it may be.
So at what age did your trauma begin?
Great question. So it's a very long story how we get there, so I'm going to try to condense it. I actually did not find out about my first trauma until I was 20 years old, but I had that thought. I had visions come back, And it was actually when I was 5. I was held. It was a neighbor. It was actually somebody that was law enforcement, church related. So it was, in my mind, trusted. And I was young. My brother brought me over there, and my mom had always told my brother, "Do not take her over. I just have this weird feeling. I don't want you to take her over to that house." And he did. And he was held at gunpoint while the father and son physically violated me sexually while the sister was hiding in the closet. That was the very first one. And there always felt like something was off. And I would get these memories that would pop in. And when you have a trauma like that, when you do not know, when your mind blocks it, I was going through the motions of life, but I had this skewed lens and I didn't know where it was coming from. So I could sense people before they came up of, wow, that person is just, I don't want to be near them. I don't know why, but something feels off. And I could just start picking that up. And then when I turned 16, I put myself in a precarious situation and was raped because I shouldn't have been alone. I shouldn't, the shoulds and the woulds and I shouldn't have done this. And from that moment, my whole world shifted. I started to become very promiscuous and I brought it on myself. I put myself in situations. I dated older men and I couldn't figure out why. And it was also because of that trauma that I did not know actually happened to me. It's like I knew, but I didn't know. So I felt a little crazy of, wow, something feels off in me and I don't know what it is. And I was, 16 years old. So we want to be accepted. We want to be loved. We want to be this. And when I started to go down this path when I was 16, my sister got married and my sister married into this well-off family that had this teen boarding schools all over the world. And my perception of them was, wow, they're doing really amazing things with these teens and you become enlightened and it's an Ivy League school. You get better education and great. I can be away from the environment that I'm currently in because I was so angry. I was angry that my parents got divorced. I was angry that my father was abusive. I was angry that my father almost killed my brother in front of me. I was angry and you just keep on going where I was just angry at 16 and I didn't have an outlet. I didn't know any outlets. I just used sex as my outlet. That was what I chose. And at 16, of course, mom starts to notice I'm lying. I'm this. I'm hiding things. I'm saying certain things that I shouldn't be saying as a 16-year-old. And I get why parents would get to that point to, I need to send my child away because there wasn't a lot of options out there, especially, when I was 16, there wasn't hardly any. And so this teen help and we're a part of the family and my brother-in-law sat down and said, okay, which school would you want to go to? And I was like, well, I want to get as far away as possible, right? I want to go to Jamaica. And one day I woke up after I had just I think it was like a second day of summer break when I was a sophomore. And these two people are at the edge of my bed. I'd never seen them before. And they're like, get up, get dressed. You're coming with us. I'm like, well, this is awkward, and they said, yep, we're not going to leave the room while you undress. I'm like, well, this is even more awkward. Okay. So got dressed and they said, you want to say goodbye to your parents? I said, nope. And we left. I had no idea where I was going. And during that time frame, I knew where I was going cognitively, but I didn't know where I was going. But I had thought, okay, well, this is, family and I'm going somewhere safe and it's great. And to be farthest from the truth, I walked into Ogdensburg, New York, Ivy Ridge, and they have you stripped down, they have you cough. I mean, it's the whole 9 yards. I'm like at 16, I'm like, where did I end up? Their whole purpose is to break you down to the point where you submit to what they want. It's the whole model. It's the Gestalt model, right? And bits and pieces there made sense. So it was if you're familiar with the seminars, gosh, and now escaping my mind, it will come back around, but they are still running today. Premier went through every single one of their trainings because they had merged in with these schools. So this point system was, hey, if you're absolutely perfect, if you eat all your food, if you don't look at anybody, you have no facial responses, you can't smile, you can't look out the window, you can't cough, you can't talk, you can't write, you can't do anything. When I talk about anything, you cannot do anything. And they separate you so you become isolated. And then when they had me go into the dorms, there was this bed in the hallway and there's girls sleeping on these beds. And one of them was mine. And they're like, well, you are a suicide risk. You are a run watch. I'm like, I have never thought or contemplated that. What are you talking about? And they're like, no, no, you are. Your mother put it on the intake form. So they mess with you the moment you get in. And they're like, "Oh, it's a process. It's only a 2-week process." I was there for a month. They take your shoelaces, they take your razors, and so it breaks you down to this point where you do not even feel like a real human. And then they try to build you back up in, okay, well, you did this perfect, you did this perfect. Now you're moving up the ladder. Now you're moving up through the level system so then you can graduate. And when you graduate, you have a life contract. So, and we could go into extreme depths on that one. But as soon as I got out, I there was this void I was trying to fill.
I just want to be sure I have this timeline. So when you were a kid at 5, you didn't know, you don't remember this traumatic experience that you had with the neighbor. That was the neighbor, right? And later you find this out, but you believe that that shaped and defined a spiraling, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe it. And you went down this path. Then your mom sent you off to this boarding school. Now, at that boarding school, it was, sounds a lot like military to me.
Yeah. It's like concentration camp without the
Yeah,
waterboarding.
right?
Yeah.
But, there was no sexual abuse there.
No.
Just
Not for
just
me. Other students, yes, but I did not.
so it was there, it was a toxic environment nonetheless, but it was a place where they broke you down through disciplinary action in hopes that you submit and then do what you're told.
Precisely. Spot on.
Okay.
And you're
Okay.
absolutely right on that 5 years old because and a little cart before the horse, but it's so beautiful moment of when we hit when we have traumatic events happen to us, it's like this hypnotic sequence that happens because we go into that fight or flight and then anything can be written. So it is a hypnotic experience for us of we go into this fight or flight. It's literally written on our subconscious. And then we assign what I like to call personas. We assign these personas of when a man smells, sounds, or touches me this way, it equates I'm going to be hurt. So I put this persona out to then protect myself, and not because we're bad or that person is bad. It's just we're associating something that is from that particular memory that we've locked away.
Yeah, it's a very interesting concept because I didn't know that this could be a thing until I read that book, The Body Keeps the Score. And
Oh, yeah.
he talks about a situation in that book where he had a client who was coming to the group sessions or whatever and didn't know that she'd been abused. He said, I thought that it was obvious that she had been abused, like based on our conversations. And he said one day she came up to him. Did you read this part in the book?
No, I haven't read this book.
It's a great book. It was because I'm an empath, I only could take
Yep.
it in small increments. I couldn't just read it because it really bothered me, like some of the things that people have been through. I've gotten better since I've started this podcast and hear trauma stories. I've gotten better at being able to like guard myself in order to like get the messages out there. At that time, I had a really hard time, and read that book before I started this podcast, and I had a
Wow.
really hard time hearing these stories. But nonetheless, that story, he said she comes up to him at one of the sessions, at the end of the session, and she's like, "Do you think I could have been abused?" And he said, "I was dumbfounded. I thought, of course, like you don't know this." But that was the first time that it really resonated with me
Yeah.
that our brains can do that when something is so traumatic that we can't tolerate it or we can't handle it, so we have to go into this place of it's blocking it, I guess, like getting rid
Yeah.
of it in our mind. But you can't ever experience things and then block it and it just doesn't ever show back up. It's gonna dictate things in your life from that point on, I think. it
Absolutely.
manifests.
The one thing that I always struggled with is that all of these different practices hit mind body separately. But you are spot on because when I got out of that boarding school, yes, it was a lot of the mind. It was is a lot of different sensories. But when it came to the physical, where I really learned what you're talking about was, like I said, match.com, started dating a guy, and then just one night randomly he's like, hey, I really have to work, but my best friend's at the Venetian, because I was in Vegas at the time, living in Vegas. He's like, go ahead and go over, I trust him really, really, like, with my kids. He's such a great guy. I'm like, oh, hey, why not? Let's go. So I went, being a 17-year-old, didn't know what the F I was doing. I was almost 18. Wow. I knew exactly what I was doing. I'm like, this is a red flag. So I go in and he starts talking about all the models that he has working for him. I'm like, how'd you know? I always wanted to be a model. Well, dumb. Like, of course they can read me. I'm like an open book. At 16, 17, 18, especially these girls with wide eyes of, oh, wow, you're talking about these nice cars and what life I could have. And so what I did is I said yes. Showed up to brick and mortar, no problem. I did all the W-2 information. I was an employee. I was like, wow, this is so great. I got a gig. Did a whole photo shoot. I'm like, well, that was kind of an awkward photo shoot. It was a little bit more risque, but whatever. I guess it's going to be a lingerie scene. And he said, hey, we're doing an initiation party. It's going to be phenomenal. All the girls will be there. You're going to love everybody. And I walk in, and I'm the only one there. And then he walks in behind me, and I was brutally raped and almost killed in that moment. And what you say of the body recognizes, because for so many years I had bits and pieces of those moments, but it wasn't until I really started doing body work. And every experience came up, to being smothered by a pillow, to being, dragged across a floor, to being thrown up against a wall. And then your subconscious does something very fascinating, is I was able to really control when I turned on and off during this time frame, because I was in sex trafficking for a year. He threatened to kill my family in front of me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to turn to, because he had all of my contact information. He even started driving to their house and sending pictures when we had the really crappy flip phones. And so I thought at age 17, if I don't do what he says, he really is going to kill my family and then kill me. So I just went with it. I complied. I had, on average for a year, on the low end, 3 clients a day, on the high end, 10. And I was exhausted. Like, there's no way to even describe how emotionally taxing that is. But as an empath and having an intimate experience, is that you really learn how to turn everything off.
You
And
have
it is a
to.
way. You have to.
You
Yeah.
have to.
Mhm.
Because I would think as an empath, that would rip you apart. And I'm
It
not talking about
Yeah,
physically, I'm talking about emotionally
emotionally.
and mentally. It would
Yep.
rip you apart because you're intuitive as an empath. You read things and you read people, you see things that maybe some miss because you're very intuitive. And then to have that kind of intimate exchange with someone that is it's just physical. I mean, I would think you would
Yeah.
have to disassociate.
You do. And if you do not, it's not fun what you get to see. There were a few times where I was grateful that I did keep it on, because I knew that if they took things too far, that I would have died in those moments. How do you move through this and just kind of get through it without breaking entirely, like you said, from the inside out? And there was moments where I'm telling, like, it was so incredibly hard. But then afterwards, I went right into a marriage. I went right into a marriage with a guy that was 16 years older than me, had 2 kids. And in that relationship, it got even worse, because what had happened to me was not okay to talk about.
You had come out of this. Was he one of them?
No, thank God, no. That would have been really difficult too.
I didn't know if you were like coerced.
It's a very interesting question, though, and I've contemplated this frequently. So the family that had the boarding schools, I got married at what is in the Netflix series. They show the pond, and I don't know if you've seen that series, The Program, but that Netflix series is all about that family. That's where I got married. And they were very accommodating to get married very quickly, like very quickly. We're talking, they said, "Hey, why don't you just get married this weekend?" I'm like, "I don't know if I'm ready to get married this weekend, but maybe in like a week or two." And I was married in a week or two. And I needed to be the star person out of this boarding school, that I had my life together, that we needed to just erase what happened in the sex trafficking. It never happened to
Was
me.
this you that thought this, or this was him?
It was me. You know, that's what I've been contemplating of. This is very odd. Why would they have me get married so quickly after this? But the phraseology that my ex used to say is, you need to get over it. You need to get over this. How do you just get over this?
Was he a
And this isn't,
narcissist?
yeah.
I can
I'm like,
pinpoint it. Boy, red flags.
absolutely.
My
You
red
know,
flag meter was I'm like, he's a narcissist. I already know.
And we're back to those personas, right? Do you know how many men were identical to my ex? And it was a trend. And then I traced it back also to my dad had that similar type of trait, very, very similar. I'm like, wow, how amazing that we can get programmed so quickly when it comes to trauma. And then we recreate over and over and over again, and we don't even know. We don't even know we do it. And then we're like, crap, how did I get back in the same situation again? There was just, my body literally broke down because I wasn't speaking about it. I started to hide going to therapy because my body started breaking down to the point where I had 11 surgeries in less than a decade. I'm like, that's not normal for a body. I was in my teens. For how much physical abuse? I mean, you're talking about hundreds of counts. You do the math of a year at an average of 5 a day. That's a lot of physical trauma.
When you got married, did you feel rescued? Because you went from a worse situation to a bad situation. But I would
Right.
have to think that, putting myself in your shoes, would I feel rescued even though I'm in this? I'm sure that was an abusive relationship as well.
Oh my gosh, you nailed it. Okay, so interesting you said that. So I had been shipped from Las Vegas to San Francisco, and I had a 2 week stint there where it was 10 to 12 clients a day. That was through my, I think, first week. And I had already met the man I was about to marry. So I already met my ex before I got sent to this trip. And he already knew what was happening. And he even asked me, he's like, "I want to save you." I'm like, "Well, I'm sorry, but I don't want you to save me. And I need to save myself. This does need to be me. And regardless of how it comes out, I need to do this." And I remember being on a rooftop balcony, and it was between clients. And one client came and getting prepped and ready. And so he leans over and he said, "You're not choosing to be here, are you?" And it was like he knew. And I looked at him and I said, "No, no, you're right. I'm not choosing to be here." And he said, "You're too beautiful. You're too smart, and you should not be in this." He said, "I want you to keep my money, but I want you to leave. And I want you to leave right now." And I had an hour window, and I went up on the balcony, and it was the most excruciating internal battle that I had.
The guy who came in, he was a client, but then you started second guessing if your pimp had sent him in.
No, it was more of, I was second guessing my pimp of, is my pimp really full of it? Would he really go kill my family? Or is he just trying to scare me to stay in it? And so this was just racing through my head. But luckily, it was like everything kind of came to this beautiful awareness where, fast forward about 6 months, I started to intentionally creep into his business, the pimps. I started to learn where he lived, where his drop offs were, what his phones were, where he put his pictures, how he did his organization. I studied everything, which is exactly what I did at the boarding school. I studied every movement, the tonality, the words, the physical route, the cars, the license plates. I just started memorizing it all. And then I could start seeing his patternistic behaviors. And there was just this moment of believing in myself that I could escape. So I called down to the hotel and I said, "My life is in danger," because the pimp was literally supposed to be coming in within an hour and a half to collect all of the money that I had made him over the course of the weekend a few days because we had, I think I had like 6 days left.
So you
Biggest
didn't
man.
leave when the original client told you to leave, you didn't leave.
It took me about 20 minutes and I was still in this mad thought process. And then that's when I called down and I said, my life is in danger. Yeah. So it took me about 20 minutes to be like, you know what? This is the opportunity. I just needed that one inspiration. And he was. And it was how he said it and how he looked in my eyes, where there was this genuine, gorgeous concern, like this angel that was inspired to be with me at that given moment because it was the strangest of feelings. I felt like if I would have stayed in San Francisco, I would have died. There's no doubt in my mind. And so I left. I biggest man. I mean, he was huge. He had to have been 6'5" to 6'7". Stood in the doorway, threw everything in my bag, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go out in style. Got a limo and headed to the airport. And I got a very disturbing call, and it was a threat. And I said, you made one fundamental flaw. You showed me your world. You showed me everything. I can destroy you, and I will. You come after me, I will burn down your effing world. So you leave me alone, I leave you alone. My father is an attorney and I will take you down. No matter how long it takes, I will take you down. And from that moment, I moved quickly out of Las Vegas. And then it was, hey, get married right away. I'm like, hey, let's not. Like, do you know what I just came out of? And looking over your shoulder and not knowing, I didn't go on social media at all. I was terrified that he would find me. Terrified for a decade. And then when I did get married, I mean, this was 2.5 weeks after I got out of this, 2.5 weeks. And then I went right into a marriage. And during that whole marriage, it was all about, we don't talk about these things. You're over it. You're perfect. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And if you're ashamed to be with me, then I get that. And then for the decade after that, it didn't matter who I talked to. And even people that did the rescues even said, you shouldn't come out because you're going to be judged. No one's going to do business with you. Everybody's going to shun you. They're going to say that, um, you were the one that created all of this and you're a horrible person. I'm like, wow, what beautiful programming we give to ourselves. I'm like,
And
well, then,
culture. That
yeah,
was culture and society putting that on you.
absolutely. Yep. You're spot on. Is that culture? Is that I just know I'm messed up. There's a difference. I don't hide behind not believing or believing that I'm absolutely perfect. And that's where my body was breaking down because everything knew me was the truth of, wait a second, we're walking around in this haze of not truth. And from all those surgeries, and then I started to literally, I was sneaking around going to therapy. And I secretly went to therapy for a year, nothing. And then it was just this constant searching. It was the strangest of feelings. I woke up in this, I don't want to say panic, but it was very close to that. It felt like all these emotions had been stored so tightly in my body that my body was just about to implode. I'm like, I do not know how, like, I want to rip out of my own skin and I don't know what to do about it. I didn't. I had nowhere to turn. I was terrified still to go to the authorities. And I had been married. I have kids. It was almost 8 years past this point. So I did. I went to the FBI, and that comes with its own trauma, and you got to relive it and talk about it again. And magically, it wasn't in FBI's jurisdiction, which by the way it is because it was across state lines, but it went to Metro, and then Metro magically it disappeared. So then what happened? So then I tried to search for my pimp and he's completely disappeared online. So you have all of these other elements going on of, okay, is it over? Because you don't ever get that closure of what really happened. Am I really safe? But then safe just becomes this illusion. And it's, how do I live my life without constantly looking behind me? And that's where I was, that big pressure cooker. And I mean, anything from medicine journeys to singing bowls to Reiki to, I mean, everything. Tried everything. And then fear battle. I took every single massive fear that I had, being thrown up against a wall, guns, water, and I faced them in one day and recorded it all. Because I'm like, well, if the other models aren't working for me, then I'm just going to take it into my own hands. It worked in terms of it was very cathartic. So there was a beautiful release in that, and that pressure was no longer there. But the hard part is that it did not rewire the trauma. The trauma was still there. So, walking on hot coals and the ayahuasca journeys, it's beautiful for awareness. It's beautiful for like a 30-day, I feel great. But then as time goes by, you start to see the same patterns replay. And that's where I have no idea how all these pieces together because all of these great individuals are talking about how mind is it. But the mind isn't it. I can feel it on my body, just as you said. Like, I can feel things on my body that I like when you press on it and you're really in tune with your body. I'm talking about really somatically in tuned and you push a certain way. It's different than Reiki. It's different than massage. It's a deep, energetic feeling that can bring those memories back up because that is where your body stored it first. So yes, we have these negative thoughts that run in our mind and we have these thoughts that transpire, but it's when you utilize the thought and understand the thought. Where is that thought coming from? What persona is saying that thought? When did it come into my world or my life? So where could I track it? Where do I feel that on my body? And how am I voicing to the world and how am I acting and behaving? So there's 5 different levels that we really communicate on. And once I started to understand great, awareness is one tiny piece, one small little morsel. And with that awareness piece, then it drops into acceptance because as you said, that this society and the environment is what shapes certain things of how we view ourselves. I will never forget the moment I was dating this guy before I met my ex-husband when I was in the sex trafficking, and I just wanted to be remotely just a morsel of normal, whatever normal means, right? So I was dating a guy and I really liked him, like a lot. And I don't even remember what happened with the client that I don't remember. I know it was extraordinarily traumatic. But what I do remember is being on his couch, the guy I was dating, and he wanted to be close and touchy. And every time he touched me, I wanted to throw up. And I couldn't be touched. It was the hardest feeling. And he started to get upset with me. And rightfully so, because
Did he
I'm like,
know? Did he
no,
know
he
what
did
you were
not know.
doing?
Nope. I kept it because in my head was if they find out, they're going to shun me. They're going to think I'm the bad person. They're not going to understand and all of those thoughts. Right. So I just said, hey, I think I really need to go. I'm just not feeling well. And I lied and I started to walk out and I turned around and I said, and it was that moment where I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to take that leap of faith. I'm going to tell him. And if he really likes me and then maybe this will go great. And I did. And I said, I want you to know that what's transpiring, why I don't want to touch is because I am in sex trafficking right now. And the facial expression, I will never forget. It was his face turned to this most disgust, this shame and shun. I was kind of in the doorway, about a foot in, and he gently put his hand on my chest and pushed me out of his house and slammed the door. And it was an interesting learning because at that moment I had considered myself being a victim. Um but from that facial expression, I started to feel shameful towards my own self. And it was the most lonely time because I couldn't talk about it to anybody. There wasn't a single person on this planet that I could have a conversation. And the strange and most twisted thing to say, but it's so accurate. If I didn't go to that boarding school and if I didn't get put in this gestalt prison, for lack of better words, that it trained me to be okay in silence and not to talk to people, I don't believe I would have survived. because it's in the moments where we are alone and there is no one around. But even in a room full of people, you can feel alone. It isn't the alone, it's the loneliness that is inside, because heaven forbid I say something that, people are going to judge, get upset, throw stones at me, for lack of better words, of because I am not this perfect cookie cutter individual that, I'm a siren. It's this excruciating lonely feeling, and it's so sad that we do that to ourselves first of all, but then we do it to each other. And it's not, I have seen reactions from people, crying over my story because it was very G-rated. It would take a long time to really get to the depths of the trauma, but I have seen the beautiful empathy. I have seen the fear behind eyes, the fear of that I scare them because I've had so much trauma that they just can't comprehend. Like, there isn't comprehension. And I look at that, I'm like, yes, I understand that, every year of my life I've had a very intense trauma that many people only have one in their entire life. I get that. But I also understand that if I didn't really go through that gauntlet, if you know of Carl Jung. Carl Jung, I didn't know anything about him until after we created this system. And my husband was telling me, my husband now, I'm not married to a narcissist. He is not a narcissist. He is the love of my life, the first man that ever, like, truly has loved me for and also been like, hey, thank you for all your experience. I'm like, oh, thanks. Like, at least you're making it a good thing, just make light of it. It's, and not discounting it, but not making it this huge evil thing of it happens. It does. It happens to wonderful people. It's Carl Jung had to go through his own insanity. He put himself there. He put himself through this intense, dark night of the soul to truly understand shadows. But what was beautiful about my experience throughout my life is that I could map 34 shadows. In Jung's quadrant, there are a total of 16 archetypes, and that is 444. So there's only four shadows. So just putting that in perspective, if he only put himself through the dark night of the soul for just a few years, but it was the hardest time of his life. And if I hadn't gone through these immensely difficult challenges and trauma, there's absolutely no way that I could have mapped shadows because I hadn't lived them. You can't reflect what you do not know. And it's the thing is, I have not heard one story that has ever shocked me or that I haven't been through. And not that I want to be shocked, please. I do not want to be shocked in any way, shape, or form. But it was this beautiful confirmation of, yes, I understand why I endured so much. I do. I get that. And I'm grateful. I'm so very grateful because there are so many people hurting every single day. And I know that feeling. I know that pressure inside that you just want to break out of your skin because you have no idea where to turn, because the smallest little morsel of healing lasts 30 days, lasts a week, lasts an hour. And you're like, why don't we have something that works? And this system that we've put together, we had some practitioners going through it, and people that anywhere from doctors to lawyers to a hypnotist, and something very interesting came from the hypnotist because she had been through a lot of trauma in her life. And it was this beautiful heart moment for me where she said, it's like you got inside my head during the traumatic experiences, because what your sequence is exactly what I did naturally and never knew I did it. And now that you've laid it out, it's like this aha moment. My body knows. I'm like, of course, because your body does it in the fight or flight to protect yourself.
Michelle, thank you so much for sharing your story. I mean, you are so open and you're so positive, and I think the world needs more of that, especially in a world where we are shamed for things that doesn't even happen. It happens to us. It's sometimes not even a result of our own choices. And I think the world needs more people like you. So thank you for sharing your time here with us today. Hey there, friend. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending this time here with us on Through the Trauma podcast. Your presence means more than you know. If this episode has spoke to you or gave you hope or made you feel just a little bit less alone, then I would love it if you would take a second, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who truly needs to hear it. Every share, every comment, every listen, it all helps our message get out and reach those who truly need it the most. Healing happens inside of a community, and together we are breaking the silence and creating space for transformation. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. You are not alone.